Alle, Alleluia. Alle, Alleluia. Alle, Alleluia. Alle, 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 Alleluia. Alle, 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 Alleluia. Alle, 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 Alleluia.
Their bachelor degree and master's degree in social work. She also has a master's degree from the Jesuit School of Theology. And she's a very accomplished ballet dancer. In fact, she danced professionally with the prestigious San Francisco Ballet Company. Now, she is a counselor, post-abortion counselor, and a retreat leader. And she goes around to parishes around the country and gives talks and retreats and parish missions. She's the author of a book titled Full of Grace, Miraculous Stories of Healing. It's a best-selling book by Ave Maria Press. Miraculous Stories of Healing and Conversion Through Mary's Intercession. Christine is married. Her husband, John, and Christine have 2 young boys. So it is a pleasure for me now to present to you and ask you to join me in welcoming our next speaker, Christine Watkins.
Good evening. So you may or may not recognize me from a show that was on ABC Nightline last July. It was called The Miracle Mysteries. It was about Mary, and it was repeated, I heard, on the Oprah Winfrey Network. And I was interviewed for that show while I was in Medjugorje, and it was a half-hour interview. And I talked at length about how wonderful the Blessed Mother is and how she's coming to us and the messages that she's giving the world that are so important. And they took 1 minute of what I said on the show and they focused on my sins. Don't you love the media? So before my conversion, I'm going to tell you a bit about it, but I was one of those people who thought I was doing everything right. I didn't have much of a conscience. I figured everything I did had a reason for it and I could validate it. And sin basically is a lot of rationalization, isn't it? And so I was doing everything wrong, and I remind myself of a little joke, and I'm going to tell it to you, and keep in mind as I tell you this joke that I love the Pope and I pray for priests every day. So this joke is just silly. So there was a guy, Sam, and a guy, Fred. They're from California. And the Pope was coming into town to California, and they were so excited to see him. So they went to the stadium, and they brought their Pope t-shirts and their Pope flags and their Pope hats, and they had their Pope cooler with the Pope's face on it and their Pope beer, and they're waving the flag saying, "Go Pope, go Pope, go Pope." And one of them, Sam, got so excited that he ran down the bleachers and he got right next to the Pope. And the Pope went like this. And Sam started walking back up the bleacher steps, step by step, slowly, looking rather dejected. And Fred said, "Sam, why do you look so sad? You just got a blessing from the Pope." And he said, "No, man, I didn't get a blessing." He said, "I want you and your friend to take your cooler and get out." So I was like poor Sam and poor Fred, just thinking I was doing everything right, and I couldn't have been more wrong. And growing up, I didn't know there was a God. I was raised in a home that didn't mention God and that thought Christianity was a bit silly, and so did I. And so I did find something I loved, though, and it was ballet. And so ballet quickly became my own personal God. And I practiced it diligently for years, and I started dancing with the San Francisco Ballet Company, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved touring with the company. I loved practicing on the Opera House stage. I loved perfecting difficult moves. And, we'd get on the plane to go on tour, and the pilot would announce, "And on board we have today the San Francisco Ballet Company," and everyone would clap, and that was fun. And nowadays I get on a plane and nobody claps. Not sure what that's about. But I just loved everything about it. And shortly after I started dancing more professionally, though, I got injured. And this ended my career. I had 3 foot surgeries. But not only did it end my career, it took away the only God I ever knew. And I grew depressed, and I lost hope. And in my sadness, I started looking into the New Age for answers. And I was definitely not going to look into Christianity, much less Christian Catholicism. I thought that they were following a fairy tale, and I was highly, highly embarrassed by Christians. I mean, the ones singing Jesus songs out front of the rest homes, how embarrassing was that to me? So, God has a sense of humor, right? So now that I am a Catholic Christian, I am highly embarrassing, and it's okay. So I turned to the New Age movement for answers because the New Age movement offered me wholeness and healing and nirvana. And I'd try different things, but I always ended up in a dead end. It's as though the New Age would dangle a carrot in front of me, and I'd grab it, and I'd reach it, and I think, this is the answer. This is what is going to fulfill me and give me healing and hope. And I'd end up with nothing. Such a deep emptiness. And I tried everything, you name it. Reiki healing, tarot cards, the I Ching, gurus. I was into all of it. You name a New Age thing, and I had looked into it. Psychic readings, you name it. But in the New Age movement, you never think of sin. Sin doesn't exist. And there's no such thing as calling on God the Father or the Son or the Holy Spirit. There's no such thing. And when we don't recognize sin as causing the problems in this world, and when we call on energy or the cosmos or the universal life force, or when we turn to someone who supposedly channels our deceased relatives, we're not really calling on God. We're calling upon the counterfeit of God. I had no idea I was calling on the Prince of Darkness with all these things. I had no idea I was breaking the first commandment. I didn't know that there really were commandments. I knew there was this guy Moses. That meant nothing to me. He was in cartoons. The first commandment, I am the Lord your God. You shall not have any strange gods before me. So I was asking all these forces to heal me and give me answers to do what only God could do. And in that breaking of the first commandment, I ended up calling on something else. And I became very depressed. There was a lot of darkness in me. And I was so unsuspecting. I didn't know there was a God. I didn't know there was a devil. All I knew was that these New Age types were very nice to me. They were kind, they were loving, they were forgiving, they were gentle, and Christians and could be a little bit jarring to me, a little bit too judgmental, I felt. And we really have to watch out for that as Catholics. Because if we come across as judgmental, people aren't going to want to receive the truth. They're not going to want to receive Jesus. Jesus often slips in through kindness, through gentleness, through long-suffering, through perseverance, through a heart that opens itself to embrace the sinner with love. And that's what drew me like a magnet. And I didn't just fall for the sins of the New Age movement. I also, in my sadness, I looked for comfort in intimate relationships. And I fell deeper and deeper and deeper into very serious sin. I felt temporarily filled with some kind of life when I was in a relationship. But when that relationship inevitably failed, I was left with a larger, darker, empty hole inside of me. I simply wanted to be held, but it often came with a price. And the more times that I had sex outside of marriage, the more and more my soul became demonized. I remember seeing a picture of the Madonna and Child, and I wanted it taken down. And I remember reading this self-help book that I enjoyed, except that it mentioned the name Jesus in it. And I had the audacity to go to my friend whose mother wrote the book, and I said, tell your mom this is a good book. But there's one thing in here that's wrong, that's very offensive. I told him, tell her to take out the name Jesus, and then it'll be a good book. The darkness inside of me was very disturbed by both the images and the names of Jesus and Mary. So I was always searching outside myself for something to make me happy, someone, something, some spirituality, some man. And I never felt a sense of inner peace, because sin never brings peace. We're left without peace. And I didn't think once to change my behavior, not once. And one summer, I ended up very, very sick. It turns out I had cervical cancer. My hair was falling out. I was bleeding internally. I couldn't keep food down. I had no energy at all. It was so hard to even walk across the street. But worse than being so incredibly sick inside my body, I felt so sick inside my soul. At times, I would just cry out in guttural despair. And my tears, once they started flowing, they wouldn't stop. They just kept flowing and flowing like a faucet had been turned on. And they were tears of despair. There was nothing healing about them. But Jesus decided to save me, a sinner. And I don't know why he chose me. And I do not have the words to express my gratitude. But I shouldn't even be here on earth. I was supposed to die. A friend of mine who was a devout Catholic, I didn't know it. I didn't know he was praying for me one day. He was right next to me. And prayer meant nothing to me. But he knew I was in trouble, and he was praying. And I felt this beautiful presence around me and within me. And I heard a loud pop sound inside of my body. And I said to my friend, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "No, but Christine, just now Mother Mary came to me. She looked down on you from heaven. She took pity on you and asked her Son to save you." It turns out that the cancer was completely gone. I knew shortly after that I had changed, that I should sin no more. And Jesus let me know very shortly after that he wanted me to join the Catholic Church. He called it his church. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. So my faith was just handed to me on a platter. And I've never doubted the existence of Jesus or Mary since. I feel a lot like the woman in the Gospels in Luke chapter 7, I believe, who anointed Jesus with her tears and the ointment. She loved much because she was forgiven so very much. Shortly after I was healed, I was in my friend's room again, and I heard this symphony. It's a beautiful, lilting classical symphony, and I wondered where this music was coming from. And so I was in his room, and I thought, well, I don't see a radio, and maybe it's coming from outside. And I opened the windows, I stuck my ear out, and no, the music's not coming from outside. I thought, well, maybe there's a clock radio that dropped somewhere. So I looked under his bed, no music, and I got really confused. Opened the door, no. And then I sat down, and I realized, oh my, this music is coming from inside of me. And heaven is rejoicing because just one sinner had been saved. And heaven was letting me in on their celebration. So I had always hated Jesus and Mary, but they had always loved me. Look at how they responded to my hatred. I now know where mortal sin leads, and I never want to go there again. My life isn't mine, it's God's life, and it was God's life all along. And being a Catholic Christian means everything to me. It literally means the difference between life and death. A few years after I was healed, I was called to go on a pilgrimage to Medjugorje. Mary called me there, and I went there wanting to find out more about this woman. Who was she? Who is this woman that one word from her mouth to God's ear, and it's done? I was healed, and my whole life changed. So that was my intention of going on pilgrimage to Medjugorje. But as you know, God can always have another intention as to why we do something, and we don't know what that is all the time. So I get to Medjugorje, and I found out she brought me there to put me to work. And familiar? And one day when I was there, I was in the pension room, and I was relaxing, and I was talking to my traveling companion, and I was thinking, I've been jotting down these notes about my life on scraps of paper, and I've been throwing them in a box marked autobiography, but I really don't want to write a book unless this is God's idea and not mine. It was one of those ramblings in my head that I was discussing. I certainly wasn't talking to God necessarily and didn't expect an answer. But I received one of those rare, 100% clear directions from God, and he spoke to my heart saying, it's me. I'm the one who is asking you to write the book. Remember, you gave your life to me. And I knew what he meant. Because shortly after my conversion, I went to the new Camaldolese Monastery in Big Sur in California. It's a beautiful monastery overlooking the ocean on a cliff. And I went into the chapel when none of the monks were there. It was just me. And I prostrated myself in front of the altar like this, face down. And I said, "You've given me my life back to me. Now I give it back to you. It's yours to do with as you wish." So in Medjugorje, when he said, "Remember you gave your life to me," I knew what he meant. And then he said, "Your time is not your own. This book will help save souls." So she put me to work, and I spent the last few years of my life working on a book that ended up being called Full of Grace. And it wasn't till I went to Medjugorje and met the people whose conversion stories ended up in the book, 6 of them, that I realized how incredibly powerful Mary is in our time, in our day and age. I'm not a unique case here. There are so many things and so many lives she's touching. Yes, it has never been easier for us to mortal sin and for sin to be accepted as good in society. It's never been so black and white, so reversed that sin is seen as good and good is seen as sin. And yet, like St. Paul says in Romans chapter 5, verse 20, where sin increased, grace overflowed all the more. Do you believe that? God sent Mary to Medjugorje because our sins had increased. And what did he do? He made grace overflow all the more. People have wanted me to show the faces of the people whose lives are in the book, who were transformed by that flow of grace. And so I made a video of it that I will show you, and I pray that it gives you hope. And I wasn't going to show it when I arrived here because I saw the Jumbotron, and I thought, oh no, my face is going to be the size of my hotel room. And how embarrassing. I really don't want to inflict this on people. But I prayed about it, and Mary wouldn't let me back out. So we do what Mary says, right? We do what Mama wants. So I'll show this to you now. The book began when I ended up going on a pilgrimage to a small town in Bosnia-Herzegovina called Medjugorje, where the Virgin Mary is allegedly appearing in our lifetime. And Medjugorje is now the second largest Marian pilgrimage site on earth. Pope John Paul II was an ardent believer in the authenticity of the Marian apparitions there. And he said that Medjugorje was the spiritual heart of the world. When I was in Medjugorje, different people came into my life who had amazing stories that I sensed God wanted written down. They were all called by Mary to go on pilgrimage to Medjugorje. And secondly, through her intercession, God pulled them out of incredible darkness and gave them lives full of grace. Each one of them looks pretty normal at first glance, but as people turn the first page and start reading their lives, they realize these are some of the most intriguing life stories that they've ever read. Goran's story is the first chapter in the book. He's a happy, healthy, kind, fun-loving family man who adores his wife, and his wife adores him, and he has 3 beautiful children. And his pictures don't lie. But Goran was not always this way. For many, many years, he lived in the streets as a homeless heroin addict. He was gaunt and yellow with hepatitis C. He was diagnosed as schizophrenic. He held up children and old ladies at gunpoint, stole from his own family, cut himself for relief, and he scrounged around for food like a rabid dog. He became so decrepit that even other homeless addicts wouldn't go near him. And then something happened that changed everything. The second chapter is John's story. Little Johnny grew up with a strong feeling of abandonment, which created a hunger and a thirst inside him to be seen and loved and held. And he was very shy and lonely, so God became his friend. Little Johnny figured that God was in the clouds, so whenever he was outside, he'd look up and felt his loving presence and encouragement. And in his youth, John pursued being popular and cool and pursued this need to be liked and noticed, but this cost him his closeness with God. And after an abortion and years of fruitless striving, which led him into depression and anxiety, he ended up going on a pilgrimage to Medjugorje with his new wife, me, and we stayed with the visionary Mariana, who was a wonderful host. And when we were there, we were present for 3 apparitions. And during those apparitions, Mary herself reached out to my husband, John. But that wasn't the only thing that was up Mary's sleeve. One day, he climbed up Cross Mountain, and when he was at the top, a miracle occurred. And on his way back down, little did he know that his life was never going to be the same. Jaime Jaramillo is chapter 3. He's affectionately known as Papa Jaime in his home country, Colombia, where he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, but too busy to fill out the paperwork, he didn't even bother to turn his name in. And I met him in Medjugorje, where he traveled to thank the Virgin Mary for overseeing a foundation he began and sustains with her help. Jaime is a modern-day hero, and it all began when he picked up a wounded little girl in the streets and took her to the hospital for care. And when she was released, Jaime followed her home. But never in a million years would he have ever dreamed of where her home was. As he walked close behind her, she began a slow, terrifying descent underground into the city sewers. And Jaime wanted to turn back, but something propelled him forward. And because of what he saw there, his life and the lives of over 55,000 children would be forever changed. I also met a woman named Angela when I was in Medjugorje, and she was full of joy. She had this great love for Jesus and Mary, and her trust in them was contagious. You would never guess what Angela's life was like just 3 months earlier. She was born into a family of domestic violence where she often feared that her mother would end up dead. She was abandoned by her father, who left her for a woman who was younger than she was, and she was only 22. And she burned inside with rage because of this situation and walked around with clenched fists. The only joy she found in life was in her job as a stripper. That is, until God intervened. Then there's Michael. He's a happily married man and a great iconographer. He was an altar boy as a child and raised in a kind, loving Catholic family that prayed the rosary together every evening, went to Mass together every Sunday. But somewhere along the line, Michael discovered that crossing moral boundaries could be fun and exciting. And he became so addicted to cocaine that he would return to the projects over and over again to get more and more of the drug, even after being shot at, clubbed almost to death, and stripped naked in the streets. Then his father took him to Medjugorje, And not only did all of his cravings for cocaine completely cease, but he felt peace inside of himself for the first time in years. And one evening when he was walking along the road and it became dark, a bright light in the shape of the Virgin Mary appeared to him about 9 feet off the ground. Awestruck, he fell to his knees and he asked her, "What do you want?" Then the figure began to move up a hill and he chased it running. And then it left him in the middle of this courtyard. And little did he know that the place where he stood would be his salvation. And the book concludes with my story. I'm not even supposed to be here. I hated the idea of Jesus and Mary, but I'm only alive because in one instant, Mary took pity on me and asked her son to save me. I have been amazed by the feedback I've received from people who've read the book. People are telling me they're coming back to the Catholic Church, or they're coming to the church for the first time. They say that they're confessing their sins and they're healing from things they never thought they would be able to heal from. They're recovering from drug addictions, they're praying deeply, they're wanting to receive the sacraments. And people are getting in touch with their own personal story and finding joy in their lives. They're finding out who they really are and why they're really here. So I tell people that if they feel inspired to, give the book to those who have fallen away from the faith, maybe even to your own children. Give it to people caught up in alcohol and drugs who don't know that there's a way out. Give it to friends and family who don't know how beautiful the Catholic Church is and how its mystical truths are real. They are reality. Give the book to people who don't know that there is a God. Give it to anyone who doubts what the love and prayers of our Mother in Heaven can do. For all of us in that video, our lives were so disconnected from God, and it was truly the love and prayers of our Mother that brought us back into His arms. And for all of you who are here at this conference, know that Mary has been loving you and praying for you for your entire life. And there's a reason why she brought you to this conference. You have come here for the same kind of reason that a person ends up in Medjugorje. There's always a divine purpose for it. And for whatever reason you already know that you're here, or you might think that you're here, I can assure you that Mary has brought you here to put you to work. She is trying to get our attention through these healings, through these miracles in Medjugorje. But most of all, she is calling us to do what she is asking. It means nothing if we come to a beautiful conference like this, but we don't live her messages. We go home and we don't do what she's been asking us to do for 31 years. Her pleas are urgent and they're constant. Mary herself has said that this is her last apparition on earth, and we will know why. There are changes coming to earth, and she wants us all to be spiritually prepared for them. Mary is asking us to live her 5 main messages. They are pray daily, especially the rosary, go to confession, the sacrament of reconciliation, once a month, receive the Eucharist frequently, read the Bible frequently, and fast on bread and water on Wednesdays and Fridays. And many of us trying to do this look at this list and say, pray, okay, I can do that. Mass, I can do that. Confession, I can do that. Read the Bible, I can do that. Fasting, someone else can do that. Now, fasting is something that we Catholics have forgotten about. Mary herself says this. She says that you have forgotten that with prayer and fasting, you can ward off wars, suspend natural laws. And don't we need that now more than ever? It's not just Mary asking us to fast, it's Jesus. Jesus, in fact, assumes that his disciples are fasting. In chapter 6, verse 16 of the Gospel of Matthew, he says three very much ignored words. He says, when you fast. And then he goes on to say, do not fast like the hypocrites do. He doesn't say, if you by chance might consider the possibility of fasting one day, that is only if you really feel like it. No, he says, when you fast. It's an assumption. You know, Mary of Medjugorje said that prayer without fasting is like a bird trying to fly with only one wing. You can only get so far in the spiritual life, and then you're going to hit a ceiling. You'll notice that all of the saints fasted. Why were they so powerful in part? It was in part because of their fasting. Take St. John Vianney, for instance, the patron saint of parish priests. He, with a little bit of help from his friends, converted an entire town to Catholicism. They became a very devout town through his prayer and fasting. All the taverns started to close. Everyone started to change their lives. And a priest came up to St. John Vianney and said, look, I've been praying and preaching to my congregation, and they're not changing. They're not getting it. And St. John Vianney said to him, have you been fasting? Have you taken up the discipline? And he said, well, no. And St. John Vianney said, well, then you have no right to complain. Fasting literally casts out darkness from ourselves, from our loved ones, and from our lives. In one version of the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, the disciples were trying to cast out an evil spirit from a boy, and they were unsuccessful. And they went up to Jesus and they said, why can't we cast this one out? And Jesus said, this one can only come out through prayer and fasting. So if you don't believe the power of fasting, I'll tell you a little personal story. My husband and I, we decided to adopt a child. We went through the foster adoption process, and we were looking for a child for 3.5 years, and we were never selected as parents. We kept looking at pictures of children and saying, well, we'll take this one or this one or this one, and then we were never chosen. So it was kind of embarrassing. We thought, well, now we're the rejected ones, and we were wondering what was happening, and I was about to give up. And then we get a call from my social worker, and she said, do you want a baby? I said, I think so. And then I called up my husband and I said, do you want a baby? He said, I think so. And so I called her back and said, how much longer do we have to decide this? And she said, 10 minutes. So I told my husband, he said, ask for 15. So we had 15 minutes to decide, and we chose yes. So we get this little bundle of joy, 2 days old, in our house, and everybody's so happy. I've never seen my family so happy. My husband's doing silly dances, spontaneous, and my 7-year-old son is taking dangerous objects as gifts and throwing them into the crib for the baby, and everyone's so delighted. And then we get this call. I get another call from my social worker. I'm so sorry to tell you this, but we're going to have to take the baby away. The birth mother has chosen a different agency, and there's absolutely nothing you can do. And I fought with her on the phone. I said, there's nothing. She said, I'm so sorry. I hate to do these calls. There's absolutely nothing. I hung up the phone, and the tears just started to well up. And I was calling friends. I was frantic. My husband had the opposite reaction. He felt like his soul just left his body. He just sunk. He felt so punched in the heart. And he crawled into bed and he pulled the covers over him, and he wasn't going to go to work that day. He wasn't going to move. And I just kept saying, there's something we got to be able to do. And I remembered Mary of Medjugorje. And I said to my husband, there is something we can do. We can pray and we can fast. So I took my rosary and I threw it to him like a lifeline. His hands came out from under the covers and he grabbed it, and I saw him pull it underneath. We prayed and we fasted 2.5 days straight. If we were awake, we were praying. Make a long story short, come that Friday when the baby was supposed to be taken away forever, the birth mother and her mom were sitting in our living room, happy to choose us as parents. Now, if you can't fast on bread and water for some reason, try something else. Because Mary says, very seriously, everyone but the sick must fast. And I know what you're thinking. I hope I get sick. Now, I was fasting, as Mary asked, on the bread and water, but I didn't realize that I had a gluten allergy. So I was having a fast on bread, water, and Excedrin Plus. And I realized I just can't do this anymore. So 2.5 years ago, around New Year's Eve, I was at this service. It was a beautiful service that happens in Berkeley, California, where at 11 p.m. a Mass starts and it ends right at midnight. It was a beautiful countercultural way to bring in the new year. And so I was praying and I said, Lord, I can't do your fast, but I'm willing to do something. How would you like me to fast for you? And he spoke to my heart, and the words I sensed in my heart were, give up what you love most. I thought, oh, I know what that is. For me, that's anything with sugar in it and coffee. So I thought, oh, gosh, okay, all right, okay, for you, I'll give it up. But for how long? And then I sensed the word indefinitely. Oh, you're being sneaky. I knew indefinitely meant forever and always and never again, but he said this very gentle word, indefinitely. The next day was New Year's Day. I was so depressed. I thought I'd lost my 2 best friends, Mrs. Croissant and Mr. Coffee. They were gone forever, and I wanted chocolate, and it was devastating because it wasn't just Wednesdays and Fridays he was asking for. It was forever. And but for 2.5 years, except for cheating with a couple gummy vitamins, I got to tell the truth up here, right? I've been good. And whenever I long for my old chocolate or all the things I reached out to for comfort, I remember, okay, is this food item more important to me than saving souls? Or is saving souls more important to me? How do I want to spend my life? And I can give it up, as hard as it is in that moment of temptation. Do we want to save souls? Or do we want our goodies? Mary places that question before all of us. And if I, who loves food so much and sugar and coffee so much, can do it, you can do something too. If we're having trouble living Mary's messages, there's a reason for this. And Mary actually tells us what that reason is. In a message in 1986, she said, Dear children, today I invite you to offer me your hearts so that I can change them to be like my own. You ask yourselves why you are not able to satisfy my requests. You are not able to because you have not entrusted your hearts to me so that I can change them. You give me words, but you do not act. So then, do all that I tell you. Only in that way can I be with you. Since Mary wants our very hearts, I'd like to lead you through a guided meditation now. And during this meditation, Mary herself will be with you. Know that Mary is truly here. She is not an idea or a concept, but she's real, alive, and focusing on you. So please get comfortable in your seats and take a few deep breaths in and out, in and out. Close your eyes and relax your thoughts and your body. Let the world and all the people in it fade away. Now is a time for prayer. Ask the Holy Spirit to be with you and to help you release any tension and open your heart. You are walking along a country road. Evening is falling. It is dusk, and the weather is warm. As you look ahead, you see a beautiful meadow of tall yellow grass and a small wooden home with a porch and an empty swing for two on it. As you walk along, you sense that the Holy Spirit is with you. Your heart feels peaceful, and you are grateful to have this time just to be with nature and to be with God. As you watch the setting sun and see a golden color bathe the landscape, you suddenly notice a woman appear on the front porch of the house. She seems to be looking right at you, as though she's been waiting for you. She is beautiful and is wearing a long blue cloak. As you get closer, you notice that she is smiling at you, extending her arms forward to welcome you. You walk towards her, sensing the warmth radiating from her heart. When you are close enough to see her face, you notice that her eyes are crystal clear, and they contain a love and compassion that you've never seen on earth. Notice what she looks like. Notice what it's like to be in her presence. Blessed Mother, is it really you? You ask her. Yes, it's me, she says, with a voice that sounds like music. I'm so happy to have this time to spend with you. Thank you for praying this way and coming to see me. Notice how you respond to her. You may wish to say something to her now. Mary touches your arm gently and motions for you to sit with her on the porch swing, which overlooks the golden field of tall yellow grass, brushed by a soft breeze. She sits down and you sit next to her. Then she takes part of her cloak and wraps it around you so that you're comfortable. You look at her and are amazed to see that in her eyes you can sense that she knows everything about you, everything you have ever thought, everything you have ever done. And her eyes are full of love. Notice how this makes you feel. You are my beloved child, she says to you. I have known you from the moment God created you in your mother's womb. I wrapped my arms around you when you were a baby. I was so proud of you when you took your first step. Whenever you were sad as a child and as a teenager, I placed my hand on your heart and spoke to you words of comfort. Each and every moment of your life, I have been with you, even when you turned away from me and my son. At times when you were about to step into danger, I rescued you, and you never knew it was me. I have rejoiced with you in your times of triumph and joy, and when you've been in pain, I've cried with you. I have come very close to you when you've prayed. I am your mother, and I am proud of you and proud of your faith. Mary wraps her arm around you and speaks to you again. Pray with the heart, and your thoughts will be on God. Do not forget that you are passing like a flower in a field, which is visible from afar, but disappears in a moment. Little child, leave a sign of goodness and love wherever you pass, and God will bless you with an abundance of his blessing. Mary begins to pray for you, pouring her heart out to God on your behalf. Open yourself to receive the graces she is gaining from heaven for you now. She begins to speak to you again. Tell me, my dear child, all that troubles you, all that hurts you. I am here to help you. Give me your heart, and I will protect it, and I will present your worries and needs to my son. Now tell her what hurts and what troubles you. Pour out your heart to the Blessed Mother. Mary begins to speak again. This time you sense a tone of urgency in her melodic voice. Live my messages, dear child. Do all that I tell you. Only in that way can I be with you. I will pray, but everything does not depend only on me. It depends also on your strength, your willingness to make sacrifices, and your commitment to prayer. The Blessed Mother now tells you that she must return to heaven. Tell her now any last words that you wish to, and listen with your heart to hear if there's anything else she wants to communicate to you. She may do this through a thought, a word, an image, or a feeling. Mary now turns her head towards you and looks earnestly in your eyes. As she holds your hand, she whispers in your ear, "Know that I love you, my child, and I will never leave you." Then you see her slowly disappear, and you sense that she is pouring God's Spirit into yours. In your heart, you hear the words, "Pray, my child, pray, and I will be with you until the end of time." Please remain in silence for a couple minutes. Ponder in your heart what's just transpired between you and your mother in heaven, for she was truly with you. Now slowly bring your awareness into the present moment and open your eyes. To close, I have just a few announcements. If you are new to Medjugorje or you would like to remember the 5 main messages that I've mentioned, I made a prayer card for you, and those are available upstairs in the bookstore. Also, this guided meditation called Meeting Mary is also available on CD. And so is another meditation I've done where you meet Jesus on the cross and you talk with him, and it's quite powerful. And a third of all those proceeds go to help build a well in northern Ethiopia where 100,000 people died last year for lack of water. And also, there is a newsletter, a free email newsletter that a priest friend and I send out every other month. It's called Discerning God's Will in Your Life, Making Holy Choices. And we found that a lot of Catholics aren't familiar with tools of discernment. You know, we think, did I make a wrong turn somewhere? How do I hear God's voice? How do you know God's will in your life? So every other month we send it out just to help people and give them tips, and we do some writing, and people have found it very helpful. So that's just something available to you. And it's sent from Christine Watkins, and in the subject line it says, Discerning God's Will in Your Life, Father Jim and Christine. And people have looked forward to it. If you get it and you no longer want it, please don't spam it. Just open it up, click unsubscribe. Your email won't be shared with anyone. Also, the book Full of Grace will be available upstairs. I will be doing a book signing right after this and through the evening. And the two comments that I most receive about the book are, one, that people don't want to put it down. It's a real page turner, so young people as well as older people are really enjoying it. And it's bringing people back to the church, I'm so happy to say. Just got a comment the other day. A woman came up to me at a conference. She said, I gave the book to my non-Christian friend who gave it to her non-Christian kids, and they all decided to become Catholic. So that's Mother Mary's work, no? So it's Mother's Day is tomorrow, so, if there's a mom out there, who'd like a book about the best mom that ever lived, then you might want to grab that, and it's spreading the faith. So just keep the book moving once you have it. And I believe that's it. I will be up there, and if you'd like the newsletter or a book, and thank you so much for listening and praying with me, and may you always find comfort in the arms of Mother Mary, who loves you so much.
Alleluia.